Welcome to the Future of Less Work, where we're piecing together the transformation of work one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today we're diving into what might be the most human question of all. What does it really mean to be yourself at work? For decades, we've rewarded performance over authentic presence. But in the age of AI, where AI can write, analyze, and even perform, the differentiator is shifting from what we do to how we show up. My guest today is Claude Silver, the world's first chief heart officer and the #2 executive at VaynerX, where she works alongside Gary V, big fan, to build a human-centered culture. Her new book, Be Yourself at Work, is a call to redefine leadership because Claude believes authenticity isn't a risk, it's a strategy, and leading with a heart isn't soft, it's smart. Claude, welcome to the Future of Less Work.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me today.
So let's start with your title, Chief Heart Officer. That immediately caught my attention. Tell me more about that.
Yes. Well, it's a role that Gary and I created. I was at VaynerMedia, which is our largest ad agency headquartered in New York, for about a year and a half. And I had been in the world of advertising for a very long time, global advertising, working on Fortune 10, Fortune 50 brands across the world. And when I started with Gary, I was put on our largest account at the time, which was Unilever. And because I was probably one of the three oldest people at that time joining the company, and I had the most agency experience, this is 11 and a half years ago, he also had me doing things that a normal HR department would do. I've never been in HR myself, but hiring, training, doing a lot of L&D, coaching, a lot of mentorship, terminating, all of that stuff. And so a year into my role there, it just dawned on me that I was getting so much more pleasure out of being with the people and the culture that we were creating inside, rather with the clients externally. I was no longer really interested in trying to figure out how to get a product into your hand on digital or in social. And I was much more interested and passionate about the people that are creating that ad.
So how do you shift from being an HR, right, which it would be the natural evolution of your story, to actually calling it Chief Heart Officer?
Yeah. So we didn't have HR at the time. We didn't have HR. We had maybe 2 recruiters. Everything else was a small company at the time. So you wanted a raise, you walked into Gary's office. You needed a day off, you took care of it, right? So I told him, thank you so much. I don't want to do advertising anymore. And he said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, I only care about the people here. I care about the heartbeat. One thing led to another. And he said, you are going to be Chief Heart Officer. He made up the word. I said heartbeat. And I said to him a couple things. One, I don't want to do HR. And he said, fine, you'll have to learn it and then hire a strong team around you, which I have 10 years later. I said, what are we building here? I've already been at the company for a while. And he said, we're creating the single greatest human organization in the history of world. Great, human. And then I said, how do we know if I'm successful? There's no job description. And he said, you will touch every single human being and infuse the agencies with empathy. And that is my only job description 10 years later. What I would say is I needed to figure out how to do that very, very quickly, how to scale that, how to scale an emotion, how to scale Gary, scaling the unscalable. So that's how we got to heart.
So here's why I'm really curious, right? We're talking about AI these days, and we'll circle back to, authenticity and fear and all that. But I'm going to stick with heart for a second. Technology replaced working hands. Then we came up with knowledge work, right? Thinking minds. Now we suddenly have technology replacing thinking minds. And some people take that, straight line and say, well, we don't need working hands. We don't need thinking minds. We don't need people, right? And you actually see that in some of the data in terms of, are we hiring entry-level people? Are we letting go? Are we freezing? Hiring is productivity defined suddenly in a different way. And I've been on a soapbox for a while now saying that that's because we're misunderstanding the nuances of the human contribution to the organization. and that it's not just the hands and the minds, that technology is taking over large portions of that. But there are nuances that are making us human. And I've been calling them the heart, but I don't just mean empathy, right? I think there's a lot more real value add layers to that. So I'm really curious, since that you've looked at that as the center of what you do, what do you think that is that makes us that makes us valuable to the bottom line, to be really, business here, when you've got other tools to do a lot of the other stuff?
Yeah, well, you need the human touch. You need a personal touch. As of right now, there's a lot that AI can do, and there are jobs that it's replacing. My best friend uses ChatGPT as her therapist. That's great. But in the workplace, right now, and as far as I can see, I don't know if there's going to be a time when AI can put their hand on your shoulder and say, I got you, and you got this. I believe in you. And I mean that with the touch. I got you. I will ride next to you. I will be your co-partner, your co-pilot. For me, infusing empathy throughout the whole agency, for me, that is humanity. For me, that is emotional fluency. That means EQ, obviously. That means the ability to also regulate your emotions. And all within all of those skills and traits that EQ holds. And then being able to speak human. That is what I'm asking for. And
So
that
who's
does,
responsible for that, Claude? I mean, in the organization, and you've scaled it, right? If it's not a small organization, you have processes and systems and managers and
yeah.
productivity indicators, right? Who does that? They infuse the humans. Is that different leadership metrics? Is that different leadership expectations? What is it?
Yeah, well, it's all of us. I mean, that's an expectation when you are applying and talking to hiring managers and being interviewed, you will hear very, very similar things and themes over and over and over again about our culture, about our beliefs, about our core competencies, our behaviors that we expect people to have here or grow into. You'll hear that in your interview. You'll hear that in orientation. And when you go and you sit with your account team, it will be it is again and again and again. It is who we are. It's in the water right now. So where Gary might say, Claude is the sets the emotional framework for the company, I would say yes. And I'm probably the emotional barometer. I have a lot of what I call culture champions out in the world in different places that I'm in contact with every day. I know that if I heard of someone in London today having a very hard time due to a parent in the hospital, and I'm hearing about it, I can Slack someone who I trust and say, hey, do you mind taking Rachel for a walk? I hear she's having a really hard time today. Great. So that happens. I also changed. We have an HR department, global. I changed the name to People and Experience because that's what we are doing. We are taking care of people and their experience. They have all been trained in psychological safety, in EQ, in feedback, and you name it. And I've had these people now for a long, long time with me. We have enormous amounts of longevity on the floor, but also in the PET department. And so it's all of us. It's all of us. Now, that doesn't mean it's utopia, and it doesn't mean all of our leaders are going to take accountability for their own actions and not, blame other people or scapegoat people. We're human. We're human. People have their slips. People have their triggers, right? But for the most part, within the framework of VaynerX and all of the companies within there, it's 2,000 people globally, the expectation mirrors what is happening on the floor.
And there's an underlying assumption and belief there, right? That Gary and the leadership team believe that's the right thing for who you are, also from a bottom line perspective, right?
Correct.
Because and that's what I'm trying to get at, right? It's almost like help me explain why that's true, because on the other side you've got all these you've got the ad that says stop hiring humans, right? Because you've got, agents to do the work. Why?
I think that philosophy of stop hiring the humans to me is ludicrous. Who do we think creates AI? Who do we think creates technology? Who do we think is out there selling it to another company, selling SaaS systems? Humans. Humans continue to be the heartbeat, the central operating system of any company that I'm aware of today. Even the tech companies need human beings right now. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but for right this minute, we are still necessary. Whether or not it's for our human touch and the warmth that you can get from me, or whether or not it's for the hands or my brain, you need us. Companies
Yeah.
still need humans.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree. Obviously, the way I've been talking about this, right, is if everybody uses vanilla AI, right, what makes you you? What makes you unique? What makes you, VaynerX versus everybody else? So just circle back to your book, and you talk about, the other portion of authenticity is or of being human is being authentic and showing up authentically, right? And you have this idea that the three pillars of authentic presence. Let's
Mhm.
talk about those.
Yes. Do you mean the three E's?
Yeah,
The emotional optimism, emotional bravery, and
bravery
emotional
and
efficiency.
efficiency.
So the
Yeah,
way I spell this out in the book is in the first part, it's for you, then it's you bringing this to a team, and then it's you bringing this to a culture. The end of the day, it all adds up to efficiency, to speed, to progress, to growth. Emotional optimism for an individual is the belief and the faith that things can get better. I can feel my feelings. I don't have to become my feelings. There's a difference there. I can feel them. But as Dr. Susan David says, our emotions we want to use as data rather than I am a sad person. No, that situation made me sad. That situation made me frustrated that I didn't get the raise I was told I was going to get. Okay. But the optimism is I have agency to change the way I think or act on that. I can become a cynic and I can say, I hate this place. I'm never coming back, or I suck. Or I can see possibility through the optimism. I can also ask for support. I don't have to sit and wallow in that feeling. The bravery then is taking action. I have felt the feeling. I am now going to go to my manager tomorrow and say, thank you so much for that feedback session. I have to tell you that I disagree with two of those points. You still might be shaking while you're doing that, but you are standing up and advocating for yourself. No one else is going to, right? That's the bravery. And then the more I do that, and I'm not mired in drama every single time someone says boo to me, the faster I'm getting. I can get through these situations faster. I don't have to, I don't have to quit. I don't have to say this is the worst job ever. I don't have to become a cynic. I have responsibility and accountability to myself on how I want to go about said circumstance or situation, I should say, and on a team as well, and then in the culture. And it all adds up to a shorthand. That's what I think of when I think of efficiency, is we've been through this road together many, many times. You now know what my triggers are. I now know what's going to make you unhappy. We're just going to get through it now. We're going to get through it because speed is where we need to be.
so
Not
if we're
hustle.
living if we could circle back with AI, and the fear is very real, right, around automation and jobs and my job and what's going to happen. Um, how would you think about this? Because you're not telling us, okay, be optimistic, don't worry about it, right? You're basically saying, no, I mean, yeah, recognize that you're worried. Now, what do you do with it?
That's exactly right. Because you, chapter in the book, are the CEO of you. You drive you. I can advise you. I can suggest to you some options, but I can't do you. You have to do that. You have to stick up for yourself or not. That is your choice. I would hope that you would have the agency to say, that doesn't feel right to me. That is what you just said on that all hands is really scary. Can you double click into that and explain why you said something like that? That is our right. And if, whether I call that authenticity or just being a human, that is our right to be able to ask authority figures for more clarity, for more transparency.
Yeah, and I think if we circle back to a human value in an AI era, right? Um, I think you said somewhere fitting in is outdated, right? So it's actually part of it has to do with we want you to speak up, right? We want you to say, I actually don't think that that's the way to go. Otherwise, how will we know?
Exactly. And the younger generations, I truly believe Gen Z and Gen Alpha aren't really going to tolerate what I tolerated as a Gen Xer. They're not. Already they're not. They have very different wants and needs, and they are vocal about them, where I and many people in my generation were not vocal. We clocked in, we clocked out, then we went to life.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think I'm calling it a new social contract, right?
Mm,
Around work, how
I
people
like that.
expect life doesn't start where work ends and they want to make sure that they're working the whole thing, right? So you talked about actually running this through an organization that's, first of all, not small anymore, but also distributed. And I think about how the world has changed with hybrid and the generations and distributed teams and people working all around the time zones. How do you create belonging? And,
Yeah.
the pat on the shoulder. I mean, you did kind of bring up the example of I contacted somebody in London, right? But how do you structure belonging into a culture this way?
Yeah, you start with psychological safety and making sure that people really understand what that feels like to have it and what it feels like not to have it. And literally go through whether or not it's role playing or it's a training that's in front of you, not on video necessarily. But you can feel what that's like when that is stripped of you, when you now feel like the ideas you have inside can never come out. I'm not safe. It's not okay. Someone's going to take them. Someone's going to interrupt them, all of that. Or what does it feel like when someone or many hold neutral space here for you to chip in and put your ideas in there or to say something, and people will actively listen. People will do their best to respect the moments that you are speaking rather than waiting or interrupting you.
And that
Psychological,
almost sounds like a leadership challenge because that's usually where these things break down, right? I
yes.
mean, leaders. So how do you, um,
Well,
I don't know, build leaders in a different way this way?
I think it's a manager challenge and then
Man,
a leader
yeah,
challenge.
you're right. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, our managers have been given this wonderful title of being manager, but no training. Oh my God, that's wonderful. You're now an account manager, and two people are going to report into you. Bye, congratulations. And then that's going to blow up because that person doesn't know what it's like to be a Vayner citizen or a citizen of whichever company you're about. They don't know the emphasis that we put on trust. They don't know the emphasis that we put on creating a place where people feel like they do not need to change their stripes to come into this company. That in fact, the company is going to adopt them rather than me feeling like I need to be a replica of Gary Vaynerchuk if I'm going to survive at this company.
So spell that out for me. That's like it's really interesting, and I want to know how.
Okay.
How do you bring in someone and not beyond just saying this, which is really important, right?
Yeah.
We don't expect you to become us. We actually want you to bring yourself and we'll expand to include who you are.
That's right. Yeah. Well, let's start with the hiring process. And when that person's going through the interview and meeting 5 to 7 people, they are hearing a consistent theme about our culture already. And I know that because I've been in these interviews and I've trained them. So they're hearing what our culture is about. Then they come in the door. Everyone's skeptical, right? Oh, yeah, of course they're not like that. They come to me in 6, 9 months. They're like, I really thought everyone was just, blowing smoke, but it's real. People are actually friendly here. People are actually going out of their way to help me, take work off my back, show me how to do X, Y, and Z. So, how do you create a culture where people feel like they don't have to change to survive and to thrive? Is by other people feeling as though they don't need to change to survive or to thrive here. And that comes from Gary. What you see is what you get with Gary Vaynerchuk. You see it online, who he is. Gary V is Gary V is Gary V. And I work for Gary Vaynerchuk, the man, who's actually a little quieter, quite frankly, and very down to earth and very wise and intuitive. He set the framework for this culture way before I joined. And now it's my job and everyone else's responsibility to continue to co-cultivate this culture based on where we are financially, where the world is, where our growth is, where the bottom or top line revenue sits, right? And so we've done a lot of changing in these 11 and a half years that I've been here. But what stays the same is how we treat people and our core competencies. So again, how do we get this into the water? How does this show up, right? Our core competencies, our foundational ones, are all behavioral: accountability, communication, growth mindset, and leadership. No matter who you are, what level you are, what department, these, you have your own. If you are an account manager, they're this. And if you are a VP, they're this. Being the bigger person in every situation is something that we expect of a VP and above. Learning how to be the bigger person in every situation is what we expect here as an account manager. And this person, if all goes well, will have enough exposure, see how that happens in real life, understand what it feels like to give someone the benefit of the doubt in real time. And hopefully it's something that they can attach themselves to. I think lastly, what I'll say on that point is, I don't believe, at least in the company I work in, that people have malintent. I don't. I feel like people have positive intent that sometimes sours because of delivery or because of my trigger to what you're going to say, which has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the way I'm reacting because of what you said. It takes me back to when I was 7 years old, blah, 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 blah. It's
So,
really behavior.
so I have my HR hat on, right? And
Mhm.
I think what you're saying is really important, but not but it's really important, and I'd love to try to figure out, right? Because it, it's easier when you're small, and
Yes.
the founders can, really create the culture the way they believe. So I totally see. Of course, I don't know Gary Vee, but like I said, I'm a big fan, and it's the what you see, what you get, the kind of conversation. So you can see how that authenticity translates internally into an
Yep.
organization.
Yep.
As you grow, we tend to think that there are processes in the middle that either build on that or sometimes hurt that, right? So, for example, performance management and metrics and productivity indicators, right? And you start distancing yourself from that one single role model that everybody knows. And I know it's still everybody knows, but my manager can be different, right? And can be maybe not as supportive, or maybe the behaviors we see everywhere. And I am trying to figure out if you did something unique to actually build those I wanted to say indoctrination. I don't know if that's okay, right? But basically, kind of teach the people that come in the door, whether they're managers that get promoted or just new hires, that this is how we do things here, and
Yes.
that kind of response is not okay.
Yes. That is something we teach on day one of orientation when they go through what it is to be a Vayner citizen, why we think this way and what that looks, why we, the behaviors that we expect of you and what that looks like. And then they're going to get that from the people and experience team and their HR business manager that they work with. They're hopefully going to get that from their manager or a manager's manager, because we have a lot to do with managers. It is in the water already. And
Okay.
I will say, one of the things that was keeping me up at night was, gosh, I had never been to Asia and I had never been to our Singapore hub, and different cultures that in places, A, I've never visited, B, I don't speak the language. And that was something, how do they feel in Thailand today? Did they feel like I feel here? And so I finally went to Asia in September, and I spent a lot of time with in Singapore, but with people that came to the headquarters there. And I was so wonderfully pleasantly surprised that they do feel VaynerMedia. What I'm saying to them, what I say resonates because someone else said it to them last week, maybe in a slightly different way. But the point of we put people first is resonating, and it's loud in those offices. Then I went to Australia, same thing. Then I went to India, same thing.
Give me an example of where it becomes difficult. So, putting people first. I actually had, I think one of the first interviews I did, I got an example of how to fire someone with, sensitivity, right? So wait, it's give me an example.
Yeah, of firing someone.
Oh no, of
Oh,
putting people first, but not when it's easy, when it's hard for
yeah.
the
I mean,
organization.
yeah. when it's hard is being transparent and letting people know what's going on, whether or not it's in their account team department or whether or not we have to do layoffs, right? And as you know, we can't just tell everyone ahead of time we're going to do layoffs. We have to be very sensitive with that information. However, what is the most important thing is what happens after those layoffs happen. What is the communication? Is it transparent? Are you getting the whole company together, or does it just need to be these 30 people because that person wasn't known throughout the company? What do we do when we have to do a hiring freeze and we have to say, listen, as you know, and you've heard, financially, it's been a very challenging year. We're not able to hire unless it's a 1-for-1 swap. What is a 1-for-1 swap? This person comes out, this person comes in, basically the same price, those types of things. Being fired from a client firing us, terrible, right? It's like, oh my God, so what do I do tomorrow? Do I have a job? Do you have a role for me? Those types of things. And so we need to have those processes and those teams in place, whether or not that's people ops, resourcing, or the people management system that we use, that people can ask for a review to happen from a peer any day, any week. And we have things in place where people, I believe, still can have the human touch, whether or not that's transparent communication, or whether that's like, I'm going to do a self-assessment and I want someone to read it this week because I'm on shaky ground here and I want to make sure what I'm seeing for myself, you're seeing too. And they can do that.
Yeah. Well, first, just the idea that that they're able to think that, right?
Yeah.
Not because there's a process in place is
No.
fabulous.
In fact, we're using a wonderful company out of Tel Aviv named HiBob, which we love as our people management system. And we've been with them for quite some time. So we've been design partners. This is what we at Vayner need. What American Express needs is different because they've got hundreds of thousands of people. We have 2,000 people globally that we need to take care of and be in constant contact with. That's why we use that company.
Awesome. Wonderful. So as we wrap up, one of the things that I always say is changing for us is we used to have answers to everything. And now I think it's more about asking the right questions. So what do you think is the one question we should all be asking ourselves about the future of work these days?
Well, I think there's two questions. I think the first one is a very selfish one, which is, what do I need to do to survive and thrive? That's what I would say. Anyone should ask that question of their manager, leader, CEO. What do I need to do to ensure that I have a job here tomorrow and the next day? That's I would say the first thing. And the second one is much more of a curiosity question, which is, we're all getting the same information about AI right now. How do you see AI fitting into the work that we do as a creative agency? Do you see a time where we will no longer need creators and we will rely on AI to come up with wonderful copy and photography, and we'll put that out on social media? That's probably, I would go for more of the curiosity question, which isn't necessarily baked in fear. It's baked in, I wonder what's going to happen.
Yeah. And maybe what's my place? What's my value add, right? Because when everyone can create copy and pictures, the source of what makes you valuable and your brand is suddenly different, right? And here we're back to heart.
Yeah, this is a massive turning point for us.
Yeah.
Massive turning point for us, and one that I'm really excited about. And just like when the internet came about, people had skepticism too about that, right? Or just when the car came about, we're always going to have horses. I know.
I at the risk of aging myself, I actually do remember the serious conversations in boardrooms about whether we should allow access to the internet from every computer in the company.
Yeah.
So yes. So yeah, I totally agree. Wow. Thank you, Claude, especially for reminding us that heart is not the opposite of strategy. It is the strategy, right? For more about Claude Silver and her book, Be Yourself at Work, check out the links in the podcast description. And remember, your best people do not work for you because you're paying them, because they have to, because you're measuring on it. They work for you because by working for you, they're doing what's important for them in life. Till next time.